Alrighty. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started with our fourth career readiness series. Today we're gonna be talking about LinkedIn and GitHub and kind of what tools they are, how we can use them, and why we, in the first place, even need to be able to create these profiles, right? And remember, this is part of the career readiness series, so we have workshops every week, which we're going to be talking about various parts of our professional career. So for example, in the past, we've talked about resumes, the interview process, the application process, and how we can build upon those things. And all of those links, both the slides and the actual recordings have been posted on YouTube. You guys can reference that within our Discord if you guys want to check out the content that we talked about during that time. And we'll also be having workshops throughout the quarter all the way through week 9, I believe. So stay tuned for that. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and we'll get started with today's LinkedIn and GitHub workshop. Okay, so before we get started, remember that we do have the BCOE Match Challenge still up. It's going to be running until December 31st, so we have about a few days left. And how many of us have heard of the BCOE Match Challenge before or have already donated? Okay, quite a few of us. Cool. So remember that the Match Challenge is an annual event that BCOE hosts for all of its organizations, right? A lot of these organizations, they will need funding in various forms, and a lot of this funding will go through and be used for all the various projects and events that are being hosted for you guys throughout the years, right? And if you guys are interested, go ahead and scan the QR code. That will take you to the crowdfunding page. And then from there, make sure to go ahead and go over to the ACM site, and then you'll be able to donate your amount there. Yeah. Any questions on the BCOE Match Challenge before we move on? No? Okay, cool. Let's go ahead. Let's move on then. Okay, so a few key ideas for today that we're going to be talking about. First off, we're just going to kind of break down what LinkedIn and GitHub are, talk about what it is and why we use it in the first place, and how it's kind of separates LinkedIn and GitHub from the other services that are provided, right? And then we'll also talk about how it's related to the application process and kind of why it's necessary inside of our professional careers. And then we'll go into a deeper dive as to what exactly each of those profiles should look like. What are some things that we should have? What are some things we should avoid? Things like that. Yeah. Okay. So with that being said, let's go ahead and let's start off with our introduction as to what exactly LinkedIn is. Okay. So how many of us have heard of LinkedIn or have a LinkedIn profile? Okay, cool. So most of us here, right? And as you guys probably know, LinkedIn is kind of social media for the professional world, right? Unlike Instagram, which is more so for like your personal lives, right? Where you can talk to your friends, share personal stories, share your like various shenanigans, things like that, right? Whereas LinkedIn kind of focuses more on your career. What are some updates regarding your career? Did you perhaps, get a new job, get a new position? Or maybe did you learn something new? Did you receive a new certification? Things like that, right? That's kind of the main goal for LinkedIn, right? And also, you can also post about, various events, right, within the professional world. So were there, maybe some ethical issues that popped up that you perhaps want to discuss or maybe receive more input about, things like that, right? Kind of in the same way that Instagram has various like discussions and like outreaches regarding certain topics, right? Mostly social issues on Instagram. And kind of LinkedIn would follow in the same footsteps. And at the same time, you're also able to network with professionals, right? So kind of like how Instagram, you're able to, I guess, network with your friends, your family members, people you may have met, on campus, things like that. In the same way, you're able to replicate that process within LinkedIn, right? Except now you're going to be networking with individuals who you may have met at career fairs, right? Recruiters who you are talking to and perhaps are interested in working for their companies, right? Or perhaps just, alumni that you came across that, you've either worked with on projects, or perhaps you are interested more in what they do, right? And the same again goes for professors. A lot of the people who are in industry are going to have some sort of LinkedIn profile that kind of gives you a summary as to what exactly they do. And kind of based off of that, you can, connect with them, network with them, perhaps ask more questions about what exactly they do. And maybe you have questions about, you're trying to implement some of those techniques or some of those ideas into your own project, so you can ask them for more guidance there, right? And as I mentioned before, kind of also going more so with like career development, right? So LinkedIn also does provide a lot of courses and certifications that you guys can take, and it'll add it to your profile, right? This is also a great way to kind of be able to show that you are competent in various fields or various technologies, right? They have skills or like skill certifications and courses for each technology out there. So definitely check that out. Obviously, keep in mind that these courses, they won't be complete, right? They will be missing out on a lot of things, and that goes with any course, right? You guys won't be learning everything about that technology or about that skill, right? You guys will have to put in time outside of your learning time to be able to actually understand how do you implement this technology, how do you use it, how do you make sure that you are using it with correct standards, making sure you don't have security issues, or perhaps you are making your code more efficient, right? Things like that. That is perhaps something that LinkedIn might not be able to teach you. However, it does give you a very basic foundation for these technologies and tools. Apart from that, you also get to learn about new opportunities, right? So for example, on Instagram, a lot of organizations will post about their events, right? So kind of in the same way, LinkedIn will post about various applications that may have open. So for example, companies, when they open up their internship or full-time grad positions, they may post on LinkedIn like, hey, we're posting, or like our applications have opened. Sometimes individual recruiters and teams will also post like, hey, we're looking for a SWE developer who has experience in these fields. If you are interested, feel free to contact me, right? So that is a great place to look for, or a great thing to look for when you guys are kind of browsing through LinkedIn. And you also get to kind of keep up with the professional world, right? So with the professional world, there are a lot of discussions regarding kind of like work-life balance, ethical dilemmas, struggles, right? So perhaps, things that professionals find hard, or perhaps, certain things that they don't find right within their companies, they bring those issues up on LinkedIn. And this is also just a great way for you to be able to understand like, oh, these are prevalent issues within the professional world. These are perhaps some ways that they are handling those issues, right? So when you guys perhaps do encounter these issues on a much smaller scale, mostly maybe within your projects, within your teams, you have some sort of idea of how you want to solve those issues. Yeah. Any questions so far? No? Okay, cool. Then we'll go ahead and move on. And then we move on to GitHub. So how many of us know what GitHub is or have a GitHub account? Okay, I think everyone here, which is good. So GitHub is essentially a professional computer science portfolio for you guys, right? As you guys know, it is a hosting provider for just general software development, right? A lot of the code that you guys have written, either for your classes or your projects, your personal projects, have probably been uploaded to GitHub. If they have not, I would probably recommend uploading them to GitHub. Again, if you're uploading class projects, keep in mind that some class projects may prevent you from uploading to GitHub due to privacy issues, so keep that in mind. However, with personal projects, again, since it's your personal project, there's no restrictions. Feel free to upload it to GitHub. And how many of us are familiar with what version control is? Okay, not too many of us. That's okay. So with large software development, what happens is sometimes developers may make errors or there are new bugs, and sometimes we need to keep track of when these bugs appeared or perhaps disappeared, where these bugs are, and things like that, right? So version control kind of helps keep track of that and makes it more organized. This way, if we do run into any problems, we know we kind of have a pipeline that we can follow in order to actually go through these steps, figure out, okay, the error is perhaps not within the last month, but perhaps it occurred within the last year, right? Or something like that, right? And in addition to basic version control, it also provides a suite of various other tools, including project management, where you're able to assign issues, be able to kind of map out how your project is going to look like, right? What are different tasks that you guys need to work on? What is the different progress states of those tasks? Are some of your tasks running into bug issues? Do you have some solutions to that? Things like that, right? You can also implement CI and CD, which is like continuous integration / continuous development. That helps speed up your development process. So for example, if you guys are deploying your website, then that is an example where you guys may use it. Or perhaps you're simply using it to just check how your code is doing, right? Perhaps you're going to run some unit tests each time someone pushes their branch, or makes like a pull request, something like that, right? In addition, it's also a great place to just store documentation. So a lot of your software, it may require very certain needs, right? Perhaps you need prior software, right? So for example, for websites, obviously, if you're using React, you guys may need Node.js prior to actually running the software locally, right? So things like that, right? You can tell them like, hey, make sure you have Node.js. And if you don't, here are the proper steps to install it and make sure that you have it. And once you have that, then you can go ahead, perhaps, clone the repository, be able to run it locally. And if there are some little steps that, people might not have thought about, or something very special concerning your project, you can also mention that there, like, hey, there's a bug in this very particular code, so keep that in mind when you're running the project or something like that, right? You can also talk about usage. So many times your software may not be as intuitive to use, and that's completely okay, right? There may be, certain steps that the person has to follow. So you can list out those steps and be like, so once, you start up the application, you perhaps need to sign in as a user. And if you don't have signing credentials already, perhaps you need to register, right? So you can kind of walk them through that entire process. It also serves as a portfolio, right? Recruiters are going to be coming to your GitHub portfolios or to your profiles. Check out the various projects that you guys have made. Check out, is this person comfortable working on large scale projects, or have they always been working on very small projects, right? Things like that. Has this person been collaborating with other developers, or are they more so an independent coder, right? Checking things like that. And also, if they were to make a project, how like cohesive is it? Is the code working? Is it well documented? So, as a new developer, could I contribute to this project if I wanted to, right? Things like that. And in addition, since it does serve as a portfolio for yourself, this also means that you will be able to view other people's portfolios, right? So for example, maybe you are following a tutorial and they have posted some code for you to follow, right? Many times that code will be hosted on GitHub, so you can easily check out perhaps certain techniques that they use to overcome problems that you are facing within your personal projects, things like that. And then, as I mentioned before, you guys are able to collaborate seamlessly, right? Obviously, before kind of Git and GitHub, the main way for collaborating would either be like copy paste your code, send it to someone else, or you would use features such as like VS Code Live Share, in which you kind of have the same editors open, right? And you're kind of coding alongside each other, right? However, many times that isn't viable just because you may not have access to the other person's computer, or you guys might be coding at different times, right? So it makes collaboration a lot harder, right? Because especially with larger projects where you guys may be making tons and tons of changes each time, it's very hard to be able to copy paste all of those changes and accidentally, forget one of them, right? So with GitHub, we're able to kind of streamline that entire process. In addition, it also provides kind of a remote and central location for all of your code, right? A lot of companies will also use GitHub for actually storing a lot of their code that they use, right? Because one, it provides a central location. You guys will be able to essentially log into GitHub and you'll see all the source code that you need for, whatever application you have. And on top of that, it is remote, right? So it's not on someone's computer or perhaps like a certain server you have to log into, right? So that is a plus point for GitHub in terms of like usability, right? Any questions on GitHub? Okay, cool. We'll go ahead. We'll move on then. Okay, so then now that we kind of know what those tools are, we'll go ahead and we'll talk about the relation to the application process, both for internships and full-time positions. Okay, so why are they important? So a lot of your recruiters, they will either explicitly ask you for your LinkedIn and GitHub sometimes. How many of us have applied for internships or full-time positions already? That is not a lot of us. Okay. Keep in mind, do start applying. Applications are closing very soon. A few of the internship applications are actually closing in a few days at the end of October, first week of November. So keep that in mind. Most primarily, I think a lot of us are freshmen here, right? Raise your hand if you're freshmen. Okay, yeah. So I guess like kind of main deadline would be Google Step is a freshman-oriented internship, and that's closing October 30th, right? So you can kind of assume that a lot of the other internships are going to be following a very similar deadline. So keep that in mind, because obviously if you apply after like October 30th, Google Step isn't going to consider you, right? So that is something to keep in mind. However, if you guys have applied, your applications have probably asked you like, hey, can you submit either like a GitHub portfolio or a LinkedIn profile link, right? And it's always good to just put those links out there just because it gives a deeper insight as to who exactly you are outside of your resume, right? Your resume is very limited simply because one, it's only one page, right? And two, there may not have been descriptions about like how you interact, right? Or perhaps how active you are on social media, right? With LinkedIn, since it is like a social media, they're able to see like, oh, does this person, perhaps care about certain issues? What does their social media kind of footprint look like, right? Are they constantly engaging in various conversations? Are they helping out people who have difficulties with certain issues, things like that, right? Yeah, and a lot of times, as I mentioned before, LinkedIn does have the certifications and courses, right? And that's maybe something that you wouldn't be able to include on your resume, either because you don't have space, or perhaps you don't have the correct like setting for it, or like not enough description to talk about it, right? So LinkedIn is a great way to kind of just dump that there, and they can kind of see more in detail what exactly your expertise are, what your various experiences are outside of the like 2 or 3 that you've already included, right? And then in terms of GitHub, they'll also kind of look at like the documentation. How well documented is your code? Have you been collaborating on any of this code? And if so, how did that collaboration look like? Were you guys using branches, PRs? Were you guys making issues? Were you guys using like Kanban boards, things like that? If you guys don't know what any of those terms mean, that's completely okay. That's content that you guys will mostly be learning within CS 100. In addition, they'll also just kind of be looking through the various projects that you guys have been working on, kind of seeing what interests you, right? So perhaps you have a lot of projects regarding web development, or perhaps mobile development, or like machine learning and data science. So kind of gauging your interests and perhaps seeing if you would be a good fit for whatever team you are applying for. Any questions there? Okay, cool. We'll go ahead. We'll move on to breaking down kind of what a portfolio should look like, right? So when you guys are creating your portfolios, there are quite a few things that you guys have to keep in mind so that you kind of stand out, but also at the same time, make sure you guys have a professional portfolio. So we'll start off by going to the header. Okay, so I'm going to be using my LinkedIn and GitHub as an example. Obviously, it doesn't have to be exactly the way I've put mine. You guys can feel free to you guys can definitely look at other people's portfolios, see how they did things, take inspiration from there and go from there, right? But this is kind of, I guess, like the home page of your LinkedIn, right? There will be, oh God, the colors look nasty. Why am I pink? Okay.
It's just a decoration for decorating.
Yeah, but do you see how pink I am? Oh, well.
You look like a doll.
Anyway, so main thing is your profile picture. The profile picture should be a headshot of you. Ideally, keep it a professional picture. Avoid group pictures, right? So a lot of times, your best picture may come out of like a group picture that you took like at an amusement park, or perhaps, maybe just a picture with your friends, right? Try to keep it independent. And then ideally, you want to have your face clearly shown, and then maybe like your shoulders and a little bit of your chest. Up to you how you guys want to do that, but avoid anything that covers like too much of your face. So avoid like sunglasses, perhaps like hats, or anything like too baggy that kind of hides a lot of your features. And then, yeah, there are not too many restrictions on that, but just keep in mind, like, if another recruiter were to look at this picture, what would their first impression be, right? Obviously, you guys don't want to be giving the wrong impressions to your recruiter initially, right? And then the kind of background, like banner image in the back, that's kind of up to you guys what you guys want to do. Many times people will do like images of their hometown, or perhaps like, skylines from their hometown. You guys can also just do a very basic like UCR, because we all go to UCR. But here you guys, it doesn't have to be kind of regarding yourself, right? It can be perhaps, talking about your hobbies, but really just anything other than the default LinkedIn banner, which is just like some abstract art. And then from there, then we come on to the name. This name here, it should match kind of the name that you guys are using on your resumes as well as your applications, right? So it's okay if you have like a preferred name that you guys put here, but make sure that it's just matching alongside all the other applications and resumes you guys are putting out there. Obviously, if you guys have like multiple names, so if you guys want to put like your legal name and then a preferred name afterwards, you guys can definitely do that here. You guys can just put your preferred or like legal name in parentheses. That's up to you how you guys want to format that. And then from there, you will have kind of the headline. So the headline will be whatever role, whatever primary role you want to assume. Many times it will be like student at UCR, or perhaps like computer science or like CS student at UCR. If you will have an internship, then, or perhaps you're working part-time as a role either on campus or off campus, you guys can put that as well. So you guys can put like, CS grader at UCR or something like that, right? Or like TA at UCR, so, things like that, right? Right below that, I just have kind of like the area I'm from, so like San Francisco Bay Area. Obviously, that's not exactly where I'm from. I'm kind of like near that area, right? This is more so just for like housing situations if recruiters are interested in seeing that. Usually it doesn't matter too much. And then you have your followers and like connections count. That the numbers don't matter too much, but try to build your network early on. This way, first you'll be able to see a lot of the opportunities that the people you've networked with are putting out there. And it's also just a great way to kind of see what's going on within like the professional world with more connections, right? Because you'll be able to broaden your network, see like, oh, these people are working on this, perhaps that is something I also want to do. And you can kind of inspire yourself from there. And then on the other hand side, it's just, experiences, education, and a link. In this case, I put like a link to my personal website. Obviously, if you guys don't have a personal website, one, create a personal website. Otherwise, you guys can use like your GitHub portfolio for that. Yeah. Any questions there? Okay, cool. Let's go ahead. Let's move on then. Okay, so then we come on to what an experience should look like. So under your LinkedIn profile, you guys will have a section for your experiences where you can talk about essentially the same content, kind of what you guys put into your resumes, right? So what organization did you guys work in? So for example, like this is one for ACM, right? So I am a professional development chair, and then there's the organization. So ACM spelled out like Association for Computing Machinery at UCR. And then here we have the timeline. So kind of how long I have been at this position, right? So I started like March 2022. And since I'm not done with the role, it would be considered present, right? The 8 months part, that's auto-calculated by LinkedIn. That's you guys don't have to worry about that. And then the location of where that organization is. So obviously ACM at UCR is going to be in Riverside, right? And then after that, I have a few bullet points talking about what I did as a professional development chair, right? And these bullet points, they can come directly from your resume, right? However, if you guys do want to add more bullet points or perhaps go deeper into the descriptions that you guys put on your resumes, this is definitely the place to do that, where you guys can talk about various things that you did within that organization, and perhaps what maybe you guys learned out of there, and perhaps what like tools and technologies you guys used while at that role. Any questions there? Okay, cool. We'll go ahead. We'll move on to the multiple roles part. So sometimes many of you guys may have multiple roles within the same organization, right? Maybe, year one, you start as a member, and then year two, perhaps you receive an officer position, and then year three, maybe you change that officer position, right? So you like slowly climb up the ladder, right? And that's completely okay. And you can express that through LinkedIn too, where you'll have multiple roles within the same organization. But the key thing to keep in mind is for each role, try to give a description as to what you did while you were at that role, right? So for example, for myself, for like Solar Car, I had multiple roles where first I started off as like just a general engineer, and then I was a business lead. I talked about a few of the things that I did as a business lead. And then later on, I was a driver interface lead. So I talked about various things that I did there, right? Otherwise, what happens is if I didn't include these descriptions, it's very vague as to what I could have done, right? There is a slight chance that I could have done nothing and just said I had the role, right? So they kind of want to see like, what type of work were you doing at this role? What type of impact did you have on other people within the organization? Were you making things better for the club? Were you pushing the club forward, or what exactly were you doing during that time, right? And what was basically your impact there? Any questions there? No? Okay, cool. Let's go ahead. Let's move on to, I think, the education section. Yeah. So for the education section, for most of the freshmen, it's okay if you guys include your high school as well. Even if you guys are like third or fourth year college students, that's completely fine. Include your high school as well. Main thing is obviously just include UCR, include what degree it is, and also like what the degree is in. So for example, like bachelor's degree in computer science, and also when you started and your expected graduation date, right? So this is slightly outdated, but that's okay. So for example, like the start date would be 2021, and then the end date would be 2025, right? In this situation, obviously you don't want to be saying present, right? The reason they have this, anyone know why this is kind of important? Any ideas?
They want to know your graduation date.
Why would that be important?
So they could recruit you for full time.
Yes.
I think we want to know how long you spent in college.
Yeah, that's another one. And then another one is a lot of internships and some like even full-time positions. They require you to graduate by a certain time, right? So you may not even be able to apply for certain positions if you aren't qualified simply based off of what like grade level you are, right? So that is also something to watch out for, and that's something recruiters will look for, right? And as Andre mentioned, they will also look for like full-time positions, right? So they want to see like, if you did do perhaps this internship, would you be qualified or would you be out of school by the time the summer comes along so they can recruit you for full-time, right? And then, yeah, any questions there? And then there is, you guys could or could not add your GPA. Again, GPA is something that's kind of up to you guys. If you guys feel confident about your GPA, feel free to put it up here. Otherwise, it is not required. Usually, companies will not be looking at your GPA, so you guys don't have to worry about it. Very few times they will have like minimal GPA requirements, but I think most of the times, if those requirements do exist, they will be very low requirements. So it'll be like at least have a 2.0 or like a 3.0, and hopefully everyone passes those requirements. Yeah. Okay. With that being said, we can go ahead and move on. Okay. So then we come on to this kind of like certifications and courses we were talking about with LinkedIn, right? These certifications, they aren't from LinkedIn. They're from an external source, but you can imagine that if, you are on these like online learning platforms, such as like Coursera, Udemy, what else is there? Oh, that's the only two I know. Oh, well. But yeah, but if you are getting certifications through there, you guys can definitely add them on LinkedIn, right? It doesn't have to be a LinkedIn certification itself. However, if you did have any LinkedIn ones, they would also pop up here, right? And it's very basic, like it's just the title, the link, and then I think if you click on it, it'll take you to the actual certificate as well. Yeah. Any questions there? All right, cool. Go ahead, move on then. Okay, so then we come on to the courses section. The courses section is important just because, as we mentioned before, they will be kind of looking at how long you have been in school, right? And that kind of indicates where you are in the CS curriculum, right? So usually if you are perhaps like a second or third year, they expect you to either be taking like the algorithms class of CS 141 or perhaps be taking it very soon, right? Whereas for a freshman, they wouldn't expect that, right? That's like something that they would expect you to take within the next year or two, right? However, you guys can put your courses here. One thing to keep in mind with your courses is the numbers here. So like CS 10C, Math 111, Physics 48, Math 9B. Those are not courses that are like widely known by recruiters, right? They won't know what Math 9C means to them, right? So make sure that when you guys are writing your courses, make sure you guys use a more generic name for that, right? So for example, like Calculus 2, right? Everyone knows what Calculus 2 is, right? You go up to a random person and be like, hey, have you taken Calc 2? They know exactly what you're talking about, right? Whereas if you went up to someone and said like, hey, have you taken Math 9B? They may or may not know what you're talking about, right? So that's why put the generic name, and then you guys can feel free to put the actual name of the like the course listing under the class name, right? And this goes for all the other classes as well, right? So for example, like Math 111, we all know it's discrete structures. However, outsiders may not know that. So it's just always good to explicitly let them know. Any questions there? Another thing to keep in mind is only put courses you guys have taken in the past. Do not put courses that you guys are currently taking or planning to take. Because when you guys do put courses here, the recruiter assumes that you guys have already taken these courses and know the content of these classes. So if you guys are currently taking these classes, it is free game for them to quiz you on it. So they may ask you like, hey, you know, I noticed you were taking Math 111. Could you perhaps talk about like RSA encryption and things like that, right? So that is something to keep in mind when putting these courses. Obviously, if you guys don't feel confident about a course, you guys don't have to put it on there, right? Perhaps you don't feel confident about putting, I don't know, like Math 111 on there, right? It's completely okay to remove it, right? And maybe later on, you know, maybe through more practice or perhaps taking higher level courses, you kind of understand the concepts of Math 111, so you can put it on later on, yeah? Any questions? Okay, cool. Then we move on to like an honors and awards section. This is usually a section that you guys wouldn't be able to include on your resume just because you don't have enough space. Great place to put it. You can talk about like the organization that gave you the award, when you received that award, and if you have like multiple awards in this case, you can talk about what those awards are and kind of just a short description as to what you received the award for. Yep. Any questions there? Okay, cool. Go ahead and move on then. Okay, and then there's also a languages section into LinkedIn. So if you guys want to include that, feel free. I just have like English and Hindi, both are native languages for me. So I just put like native or bilingual proficiency. Obviously for each, there are like multiple steps. So for example, if you have like limited proficiency in one of the languages, you guys can specify that as well, right? And it does break it up, I think, into like 4 or 5 like levels. So kind of assess yourself as to where you think your language skills are with that particular language, and then you'll be good to go. Cool. Okay. Any final questions about LinkedIn before we move on to GitHub? Okay, cool. So let's go ahead. Let's go into a GitHub breakdown then. Epic pink color. Okay. So this again is gonna be the landing page for your GitHub profile, right? Once again, you will have a profile picture. Here, the profile picture doesn't matter too much, as long as it's a shot of yourself. This one I think looks pretty cool, so that's why I put it up there. Otherwise, name, again, this name should be matching your profiles that you guys use for LinkedIn, resumes, and like applications, right? And then at the bottom is your GitHub username, right? So try your best not to get these mixed up because your GitHub username is different. It's, I guess, kind of like your Instagram name versus like the profile that you use, right? Yeah, and then try to keep a professional GitHub username, right? So don't have something super whack, right? Like, yeah, I think all of you guys are able to assess if your GitHub username is appropriate and like professional, right? And then at the bottom, you guys will also have like a headline that you guys can kind of just give a quick one-liner about who you are and perhaps maybe what type of work you're doing, right? So in this case, I just said like computer science BS plus MS at UCR. Any questions there? Okay, cool. Okay, so there is a short description for the GitHub as well. So here you can just, you'll have like followers and following stuff. That is kind of up to you guys if you guys want GitHub as social media. But the main thing is just this stuff here. So first off, you'll have kind of your education. So here, feel free to put UCR again. Make sure to spell it out if it's not already kind of enumbered for you. So if they're not giving you the option where you type in like UCR and it gives you University of California, Riverside, make sure to do that explicitly yourself. We have mentioned this point why before. Does anyone remember why we should explicitly spell it out rather than just saying UCR? Yeah. a lot of people outside of California might not actually know what UCR stands for, right? UCR is a very like California term. And on top of that, it may even be a very like college term too, right? So that's something to keep in mind. And yeah, and then I just have hometown. Again, this isn't required. If you guys want to put it, feel free. Otherwise, not required. Some sort of email if they want to contact you directly. You guys can use a personal email or a professional email, up to you. Usually, you shouldn't be receiving a lot of spam to this, so it should be safe, but just something to keep in mind. And then finally, a link. In this case, I have a link to like my personal website. Most people will put a link to their personal website, but you can feel free to put a link to your LinkedIn if you're still working on the personal website. Yeah. How many of us are working on a personal website or already have one? Not a lot of us. Okay. All of us should be working on a personal website. Well, one, because it's a great personal project to work on, just kind of get your feet wet, be able to just show your creativity outside of your resume, because now here you'll be able to show your various hobbies, your various like creativity and whatnot that obviously you can't show on your resume for like ATS purposes, right? And on top of that, it's also just a great way for recruiters to kind of jump onto your website, be able to get a quick summary of who you are, what are your interests, what are your hobbies, what are your experiences, skill sets, things like that. Yeah. Any questions on this stuff so far? Okay, cool. We'll move on then. Okay, so then we have a pinned section. So within GitHub, each repository should be its own project, right? You guys don't want to be shoving all of your projects into a single repository. It should be split up. And obviously, as you guys work on multiple projects, you guys will have multiple repositories, which is completely fine, right? It is better to have your code split up into multiple repositories than trying to shove all of them into one, right? However, there will be perhaps some projects that you like more than others, right? Perhaps some projects that were either very large scale, or perhaps you worked with a lot of other developers, things like that, right? Or projects you're just very proud of in general, right? So projects like those, this is kind of where you get to highlight them, right? So kind of, if we kind of go back to like Instagram, right? Most of you guys probably know there's a pinned feature on Instagram where you guys are able to pin some posts, right? TikTok also has the same feature where you guys can pin your, I guess, like most favorite TikToks or your most like viewed TikToks, right? So same concept with GitHub. In this case, I put like very large scale projects that, and also projects that have like a lot of collaboration. This way, if a recruiter were to kind of go to the landing page of your GitHub, they're able to see large scale projects that you have worked on, right? So they, ideally, you'd want one of them to click into this and kind of see more about that project, right? And hopefully it's a cool enough project where they're like, wow, this person really did something, right? And I'm like, I think they're a great role for this position. Let's accept them, right? Something like that. And you guys are able to customize this. So if you guys see in the upper right-hand corner, there's a customize your pins. So you guys can select exactly which repositories you guys want to show and not show, right? And you guys, these like 6 dots here allow you to move the pins up and down. So there's tons of customizability regarding like what order it is, what repositories are showing up and whatnot. Any questions there? All right, cool. Okay. Then we come on to the actual repository. So within each repository, obviously, all of you guys will have the code, right? And I think that's kind of the main thing that we focus on, right? However, it is also important to make sure that we are properly like documenting our code, or at least giving a brief description as to what the code does, right? So in this case, this was like a hardware project that I did, and this is the README file for it. Does anyone know what a README is? Yeah.
File
Yes. Anyone have a more like generic description? Yeah. Yeah, you can kind of think of it as like a landing page for your repository, right? So you'll have usually it'll be a description about how to locally use the software, right? So with websites, an automatic README file is given regarding how to clone it, how to run it, what are different commands you can use, things like that, right? So in this case, you can't really run it locally because you need the hardware as well. So I just gave like a quick description as to what the project was, what are some cool features for the project. I also provided some images as to like how the project works, and any like useful diagrams, things like that, right? And I also provided links as to where my like deployed version is, right? So in this case, I gave a link to like instructables, but you can imagine if it's solely a software project, you can have a link to perhaps like the actual deployed version of your project, right? Yeah. Any questions there? Okay, cool. Let's go ahead. Let's move on. I think that's, yeah. So we'll move on to just general tips. Okay, so how many of us have already built our resume? Okay, not a lot of us, about half of us. How many of us have gotten our resume checked by someone else? Okay, even less. Okay, first things first, make sure if you have not already built your resume, go ahead and build it. Get it checked out by someone. You guys can give it to me. I'll check it out. Otherwise, you guys can feel free to ask like any officer. I'm pretty sure they'd also be happy to check out your resume. And then a lot of the LinkedIn content that you guys will be using will probably come from your resume, right? So it's a great way to just kind of be able to build two things at once, right? Obviously, your LinkedIn will probably have more content than your resume. However, it's a great start to just kind of pull content from your resume and build it into your LinkedIn first. Apart from that, that's kind of on the LinkedIn side of things. For the GitHub side of things, make sure you guys polished out your GitHub repositories. So if you guys already have existing projects, make sure that you guys are polishing out the READMEs, put a project description, deployed versions, perhaps certain notes or how to use the software, maybe upload screenshots as to how the software looks, maybe some instructions, things like that, right? And then, as I mentioned before, right now, I've only showed my profile, right? However, feel free to look at other people's profiles, both for LinkedIn and GitHub, to kind of see what exactly they've used, what are different techniques or ideas that they've implemented into their portfolios, and feel free to take those ideas from them. Yeah. Okay. And then finally for LinkedIn, this is a very small kind of like mini thing, but it is, I guess, kind of important. For LinkedIn, there is a way to create like a semi-customizable URL. Essentially, by default, your URL will usually be like your first name hyphen last name hyphen some sort of hash value, right? And that's for like LinkedIn purposes. However, you guys are able to customize that, and I recommend customizing it so that when you guys do share your LinkedIn profiles, you guys don't have to give them that hash value, right? And then there are steps. You guys can also just search it up, but it should just be like edit public URL or something like that. And just remove the hash numbers just so it's just your like first name, last name, or whatever you guys want as your preferred name up there. Any questions there? Okay, cool. That's pretty much it. Anyone have any final questions? Okay. With that being said, just a quick reminder, this is an ACM event. So we do be the largest computer science organization on campus. We host various workshops throughout the quarter, throughout the year. We also host events, socials, and projects. So we have ongoing projects right now. We also have future planned projects. And if you guys are interested in learning more about all of these events, feel free to check out our website at acm.cs.ucr.edu. You guys can also just search us up at ACM UCR on Google, and we will show up because our search engine optimization is finally fixed. And from there, you guys can also join our Discord server. This is primarily where we are going to be putting a lot of our announcements. So stay updated on that. Apart from that, that's pretty much it for today's workshop. Thank you guys for coming. Reminder, we have a workshop next week where we will be talking about some more professional development stuff. And then with the remaining time, if you guys want me to check your resumes, I can do that. If you guys have any questions regarding your personal LinkedIn profiles or perhaps just want inspiration, let me know and I can help you guys out. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys for coming.